Earlier this week, the U.S. President Donald Trump threatened military action in Nigeria over what he claims is the persecution of Christians. He made the comment as Democrats won Tuesday's U.S. election night. On the continent, the Sudan war between the army and the Rapid Support Forces continues to devastate communities. And the African Union announced that last week's Tanzanian elections failed to comply with democratic standards, as opposition said hundreds were killed in post-election protests. For more on this and other international news now, we're joined by Thembisa Fakude, who is a senior research fellow at the Africa-Asia Dialogues. Thembisa, great to have you on the agenda once again. And I mean, just looking at the comments, the most recent comments of the U.S. President Donald Trump, I think this was, on the 9th of November, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, the U.S. president now saying that no U.S. official would attend the G20 Leaders Summit here in South Africa as long as Afrikaners are being killed and slaughtered. Let me get your reaction to that. Any surprises to what seems to be flip-flopping every here and there?
Well, I take whatever Donald Trump says with a pinch of salt. Obviously, they were Americans. There might be junior Americans, officials who are going to be at the G20, but certainly there's going to be Americans. So whatever he says, we have to take it with a pinch of salt. Not long ago, he confirmed that J.D. Vance was going to be attending instead of him. Now he's telling us that no Americans are going to be there, which is obviously going to be changing very soon, because I can rest assure you that Americans are going to be there. They've been working with the current secretariat in organizing this G20. As you know, there's a tripartite chairpersonship secretariat, which is consists of the past, present, and future leadership or chairpersonship of the G20. And Americans were part and parcel of that. South Africa will be working with America after President Cyril Ramaphosa hands over the chairpersonship on the 25th. So that's one. Number two is President Trump is on a back foot at the moment in the United States, following heavy criticism about him prioritizing white refugees into the United States. So he's shifting the goalposts by basically saying it's not about whiteness, it's about the persecution of Afrikaners, which is obviously false and a lie. And I think we should laugh this off, and South Africa should not really worry much about these kind of statements. There's no country in the world that has reported on this. There's no media in the world that has reported on this. Obviously, it's Donald Trump's dream world fantasies that he's reporting on. And for me, at least from where I sit, what is of more concern is that those that went to peddle this lie in the United States in a form of solidarity and others are chup still, to use an Afrikaans word, at the moment. Instead of them showing up and refuting these lies, they're not saying a word, and they continue, of course, somehow benefiting from this lie. But I don't see it succeeding in terms of turning a global public opinion against South Africa, nor discouraging any foreign direct investment towards our way. Yeah,
and not just that. I mean, Trump is also not attending the COP30 climate summit in Brazil. I mean, with what the sentiments he's shared about South Africa, and as you correctly point out, you don't see any media pointing or reporting about any of these claims that are being made, but he persists on that narrative of what is happening in South Africa on his own accord.
Yeah, because he's trying to get out of the quagmire that he finds himself following heavy criticism in the United States about him prioritizing white people. So basically saying, no, the Afrikaners is not about them being white, but it's about persecution, which is, again, a lie. The fact that he's not attending the COP30 in Brazil, again, is claiming that the world is getting colder instead of hotter. Now, this is the leader you're dealing with. So I think, again, as I've said, we need to take whatever says with a pinch of salt. But importantly, I don't think we should give it the seriousness that currently the South African, at least, media and government are giving.
Yeah.
This latest breaking news from Donald Trump, because as whatever I say is, I take it to the pinch of salt, and I can again rest assure you that there will be U.S. officials at the G20. They might not be at the level of cabinet ministers, but there will certainly be the presence of the U.S. Officials there because, as I've said, they're already working with the tripartite secretariat of the G20. They were part and parcel, in fact, in the planning and the organizing of this G20.
Yeah, you did say he believes that the world is getting colder, so no surprise that he will not even be attending COP30. Let's talk about that. And I mean, earlier this week, the U.S. president also threatening to attack Nigeria over attacks on Christians.
Yeah, another statement that's ridiculous. Nigerians have since traveled to the United States to try and speak to Donald Trump. The Nigerians are upset because this is creating serious religious intra-polarization in Nigeria. And Nigerians, of course, have rejected all of this. Trump is trying to present himself as a savior of Christendom around the world by, presenting himself and threatening to attack Nigeria for persecuting the Christians, notwithstanding that the majority of the Nigerians, particularly those in government, are Christians. I'm not even quite sure whether he understands that. And we don't even know who is going to be attacking. Is it Boko Haram, or is it going to be the government of Nigeria, or is it going to be the Muslims in the north, particularly in places such as Kaduna, Kanu, and others? So it's a very confusing statement. And again, it's about, as far as I'm concerned, attention-seeking mechanism, which we are used to from Donald Trump, one. Number two is also he uses this kind of ridiculous statements to send the entire world in a wild goose chase while the important issues are taking place in the United States. So he's trying to get the attention away from him because he's facing a lot of backlash. There were elections which favor the Democrats in the United States, and he doesn't like that limelight because it's taken away from him.
In fact, let's go to that on Tuesday, election night. The Democrats won everything. I mean, let's look at, notably Zoran Mamdani winning the New York mayoral election. And you could clearly see, well, at least from me sitting in South Africa, there had been some celebration with regard to that. Let's talk about that as well.
Yeah, well, notwithstanding the millions of dollars that were pumped and invested into Andrew Cuomo's electoral campaign, somehow you have Zoran Mamdani winning. That's one. Trump has since threatened, of course, Zoran Mamdani, including the Israelis. But we see some of the Orthodox Jews in New York supporting Zoran Mamdani. So it has been a disappointment. But this is a sign of things to come. And you are now seeing the Republicans coming back and saying that they need to intensify their campaign, because if they don't intensify the campaign, chances are, if the Democrats come back into power, they are likely to be persecuted.
Yeah, and we've been monitoring what was coming out of Tanzania as well. I think it was about last week, round about this time, where the Electoral Commission in that country had declared that the president had won the election there, quite a landslide. The African Union now announcing last week that Tanzania's election failed to comply with democratic standards, as the opposition said hundreds were killed in post-election protests. Now, we also had human rights organizations who basically said that the figure that the opposition speaks of is not correct. There had been a lot of to and fro about exactly how many people were killed during that particular period. How do we see this play out, in Tanzania as that country tries to move forward?
Well, the country is not going to move forward as long as you have this dictator making in the form of Samia Suluhu Hassan. Last night, SADC, South African Development Community, issued a statement congratulating the elections that were held, amongst others, in Tanzania. Extremely disappointing. President Cyril Ramaphosa has been sitting on the fence and refused, or not even refused, running away from congratulating President Suluhu Hassan. And now, under the guise of SADC, we saw them congratulating the elections, notwithstanding that we had throngs of people that were killed, displaced, others kicked out of the country, others tortured. And you have this organization that's supposed to be representing all of us going on and celebrating and congratulating this open dictatorship and torture. Extremely disappointing. And I think the statements that were issued last night by SADC is likely to really create problems for SADC. But importantly, it is likely going to undermine its credibility within Southern Africa, because you can't celebrate that obvious violation of basic rights and electoral processes. She claims to have won the elections by 97%, and yet her inauguration took place in an army barracks. One would have expected that if she's really did win with 97%, they'll be shutting down the streets of Dar es Salaam and all other cities in Tanzania in celebration of this heroine. But alas, she celebrated or had her inauguration in the army barracks. And yet now you have the SADC congratulating the electoral process. Of course, they didn't congratulate her, but congratulating the electoral process as if that electoral process was peaceful and stable, notwithstanding that everyone is criticizing what happened in Tanzania.
Thembisa, always great speaking to you. Thank you very much indeed, touching on a number of very important issues here on the continent and globally as well.